Here we go with another classic. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, If I Were a Man. If I were a man. No, it's not a sing. If I were a man. That's what pretty little Miss Molly Matthewson said when Gerald would not do what she wanted him to, which was seldom. That was what she said this bright morning with a stamp of her little high-heeled slipper, just because he had made a fuss about that bill. The long one with the account rendered, which she had forgotten to give him the first time and been afraid to the second, and now he had taken it from the postman himself. Molly was true to type. She was a beautiful instance of what is reverently recalled as a true woman. Little, of course. No true woman may be big. Pretty, of course. No true woman could possibly be plain. Whimsical, capricious, charming, changeable, devoted to pretty clothes, and always wearing them well, as the esoteric phrase has it. This does not refer to the clothes they do not wear well in the least, but to some special grace of putting them on and carrying them about, granted to but few, it appears. She was also a loving wife and a devoted mother, possessed of the social gift and the love of society that goes with it, and with all these was fond and proud of her home, and managed it as capably as well as most women do. If ever there was a true woman, it was Molly Matthewson. Yet she was wishing heart and soul she was a man, and all of a sudden she was. She was Gerald. Oh, sorry. She was Gerald, walking down the path so erect and square-shouldered, in a hurry for his morning train, as usual, and, it must be confessed, in something of a temper. Her own words were ringing in her ears, not only the last word, but several that had gone before, and she was holding her lips tight shut. Not to say something she would be sorry for, but instead of acquiescence in the position taken by that angry little figure on the veranda, what she felt was a sort of superior pride, a sympathy as with weakness, a feeling that I must be gentle with her, in spite of the temper. A man. Really a man, with only enough subconscious memory of herself remaining to make her recognize the differences. At first, there was a funny sense of size and weight and extra thickness. Oh, wink. And the feet and hands seemed strangely large, and her long, straight, free legs swung forward at a gait that made her feel as if on stilts. This presently passed, and in its place, growing all day, wherever she went, came a new and delightful feeling of being the right size. Everything fitted now. Her back snugly against the seat back, her feet comfortably on the floor. Her feet? His feet! She studied them carefully. Never before since her early school days had she felt such freedom and comfort. As to feet, they were firm and solid on the ground when she walked, quick, springy, safe as when moved by an unrecognizable impulse. She had run after, caught, and swung aboard the car. Another impulse fished, I think that's like a streetcar or something like that. Another impulse fished in a convenient pocket for change instantly. Fished in a convenient pocket for change instantly, automatically, bringing forth a nickel for the conductor and a penny for the newsboy. These pockets came as a revelation, of course. She had known they were there, had counted them, made fun of them, mended them, even envied them, but she never had dreamed of how it felt to have pockets. Behind her newspaper, she let her consciousness, the odd mingled consciousness, rove from pocket to pocket, realizing the armored assurance of having all those things at hand, instantly gettable, ready to meet emergencies, the cigar ready to read. Oh my gosh, I don't know what a period is. The cigar case gave her a warm feeling of comfort. It was full. The firmly held fountain pen, safe unless she stood on her head. The keys, pencils, letters, documents, notebook, checkbook, bill folder, all at once with a deep rushing sense of power and pride. She felt what she had never felt before in all her life, the possession of money, of her own earned money, hers to give or to withhold, not to beg for, tease for, whittle for, hers. That bill, why, if it had come to her, to him, he would have paid it as a matter of course, and never mentioned it to her. Then, being he, sitting there so easily and firmly with his money in his pockets, she awakened to his lifelong consciousness about money. Boyhood, its desires and dreams, ambitions, young manhood, working tremendously for the wherewithal to make a home for her. The present years, with all their net of cares and hopes and dangers, the present moment when he needed every cent for special plans to create of great importance. And this bill, long overdue and demanding payment, meant an amount of inconvenience wholly unnecessary if it had been given to him when it first came. Also, the man's keen dislike of that account rendered. Women have no business sense, she found herself saying, and all that money just for hats, idiotic, useless, ugly things. With that, she began to see the hats of women in the car as she had never seen them before. The men's seemed normal, dignified, becoming, with enough variety for personal taste, and with distinction in style and in age, such as she had never noticed before. But the women's, with the eyes of a man and a brain of a man, with the memory of a whole lifetime of free action wherein the hat, close-fitting on cropped hair, had been no handicap, she now perceived the hats of women. The massed, fluffed hair was at once attractive and foolish, and on the hair, at every angle, in all colors, tipped, twisted, tortured into every crooked shape, made of any substance chance might offer, perched these formless objects. Then, on their formlessness, the trimmings, these squirts of stiff feathers, these violent outstanding bows of glistening ribbon, these swaying, projecting masses of plumage which tormented the faces of bystanders. Never in all her life had she imagined that these idolized millinery could look, to those who paid for it, like the decorations of an insane monkey. And yet, when there came into the car a little woman, as foolish as any, but pretty and sweet-looking, up rose Gerald Mathewson and gave her his seat. And later, when there came in a handsome red-cheeked girl, whose hat was wilder, more violent in color, and eccentric in shape than any other, when she stood nearby, and her soft curling plumes swept his cheek once and again, he felt a sense of sudden pleasure at the intimate tickling touch, and she, deep down within, felt such a wave of shame as might well drown 1,000 hats forever. When he took his train, his seat in the smoking car, he had a new surprise. All about him. No, she had a new surprise. All about him were other men, commuters too, many of them friends of his. To her, they would have been distinguished as Mary Wade's husband, the man Belle Grant is engaged to, that rich Mr. Shopworth, or that pleasant Mr. Beale. And they would all have lifted their hats to her, bowed, made polite conversation if near enough, especially Mr. Beale. Now came the feeling of open-eyed acquaintance, of knowing men, as they were. The mere amount of this knowledge was a surprise to her. The whole background of talk from boyhood up, the gossip of barber shop and club, the conversation of morning and evening hours on trains, the knowledge of political affiliation, the business standing and prospects. Of business standing and prospects, of character, in a light she had never known before. They came and talked to Gerald, one and another. He seemed quite popular, and as they talked, with this new memory and new understanding, an understanding which seemed to include all these men's minds, there poured in and on the submerged consciousness beneath a new, startling knowledge. What men really think of women. Good, average American men were there, married men for the most part, and happy, as happiness goes in general. In the minds of each and all, there seemed to be a two-story department, quite apart from the rest of their ideals, a separate place where they kept their thoughts and feelings about women. In the upper half were the tenderest emotions, the most exquisite ideals, the sweetest memories, all lovely sentiments as to home and mother, all delicate admiring adjectives, a sort of sanctuary where the veiled statue blindly adored. Where a veiled statue, blindly adored, shared place with beloved yet commonplace experiences. In the lower half, here that buried consciousness woke to keen distress. They kept quiet another assortment of ideas. Here, even in this clean-minded husband of hers, was the memory of stories told to men's dinners, stories told at men's dinners, of worse ones overheard in street or car, or of base traditions, coarse epithets, gross experiences, known though not shared. And all these in the department woman, while in the rest of the mind, here was new knowledge indeed. The world opened before her. Not the world she had been reared in, where home had covered all the map almost, and the rest had been foreign or unexplored territory, but the world as it was, man's world, as made, lived in, and seen by men. It was dizzying to see the houses that fled so fast across the car window in terms of builder's bills or some technical insight into materials and methods, to seeing a passing village with lamentable knowledge of who owned it and how its boss was rapidly aspiring in state power, or how that kind of paving was a failure, to see shops not as merely exhibitions of desirable objects, but as business ventures, many mere sinking ships, some promising a profitable voyage. This new world bewildered her. She, as Gerald, had already forgotten about the bill, over which she, as Molly, was still crying at home. Gerald was talking business with his men, talking politics with that, and now sympathizing with the carefully withheld troubles of a neighbor. Molly had always sympathized with a neighbor's wife before. She began to struggle violently with this large, dominant, masculine consciousness. She remembered with sudden clearness things she had read, lectures she had heard, and resented the increasing intensity this serene masculine preoccupation with the male point of view. Mr. Miles, the little fussy man who lived on the other side of the street, was talking now. He had a large, complacent wife. Molly had never liked her much, but had always thought him rather nice. He was so punticulous in small courtesies. And here he was talking to Gerald. Such talk. Had to come in here, he said. Gave my seat to a dame who was bound to have it. There's nothing they won't get when they make their minds up to it, eh? No fear, said the big man in the next seat. They haven't much mind to make up, you know, and if they do, they'll change it. The real danger, began the Reverend Alfred Smith, the new Episcopal clergyman, a thin, nervous, tall man with his face several centuries behind the times. Rostrade just roasting this dude. Is that they'll overstep the limits of their God-appointed sphere. Their natural limits ought to hold 'em, I think, said cheerful Dr. Jones. You can't get around physiology, I tell you. I've never seen any limits myself, not to what they want, anyhow, said Mr. Miles. Merely a rich husband and a fine house and no end of bonnets and dresses and the latest thing in motors and a few diamonds and so on. Keeps us pretty busy. There was a tired gray man across the aisle. He had a very nice wife, always beautifully dressed, and 3 unmarried daughters, also beautifully dressed. Molly knew them. She knew he worked hard, too, and she looked at him now a little anxiously. But he smiled cheerfully. Do you good, Miles, he said. What else would a man work for? A good woman is about the best thing on earth. And a bad one's the worst, that's sure, responded Miles. She's a pretty weak sister, viewed professionally, Dr. Jones averred with solemnity, and the Reverend Alfred Smith added, she brought evil into the world. Gerald Mathewson sat up straight. Something was stirring in him which he did not recognize, yet could not resist. Seems to me like we all talk like Noah, he suggested dryly, or the ancient Hindu scriptures. Women have their limitations, but so do we, God knows. Haven't we known girls in school and college just as smart as we were? They cannot play our games, coldly replied the clergyman. Gerald measured his meager proportions with a practiced eye. I never was particularly good at football myself, he modestly admitted. But I've known women who could outlast a man in all-round endurance. Besides, life isn't spent in athletics. This was sadly true. They all looked down the aisle, where a heavily ill-dressed man with a bad complexion sat alone. He had held the top of the columns once, with headlines and photographs. Now he earned less than any of them. It's time we woke up. Gil woke. That's what Gerald's going to say. Pursued Gerald, still inwardly urged to unfamiliar speech. Women are pretty much people, seems to me. I know they dress like fools, but who's to blame for that? We invent all those idiotic hats of theirs and design their crazy fashions. And what's more, if a woman is courageous enough to wear common sense clothes and shoes, which of us wants to dance with her? Yes, we blame them for grafting on us, but are we willing to let our wives work? We are not. It hurts our pride, that's all. We are always criticizing them for making mercenary marriages, but what do we call a girl who marries a chump with no money? Just a poor fool, that's all, and they know it. As for Mother Eve, I wasn't there and can't deny the story, but I will say this. If she brought evil into the world, we men have had the lion's share of keeping it going ever since. How about that? Catch him outside. They drew into the city, and all day long in his business, Gerald was vaguely conscious of new views, strange feelings, and the submerged Molly learned and learned. So, basic thoughts here on this one. I'm sure this one ruffled a bunch of feathers when it was published. I want to say 1914, 1915, 19 something. The woman that wrote it was a feminist at the time, or like actively a prolific writer. What else did she do? I got a few notes here. Sorry. Orator. She did a lot of speeches, and I think she had a newspaper towards the end of her life. I just quick glancing through it. I think the story's pretty fun. I think that's like a perspective thing a lot of people don't do. It's a classic, walk in somebody else's shoes, walk a mile in someone else's shoes, from this perspective of a wife on the husband. And then you could do the other way around too. Thinking about women's rights before suffrage, or in the process of getting suffrage, and then trying to like equalize out for everybody after that. Excuse me. Gender roles kind of be pretty consistent and slapped on, and you gotta follow them really aggressively, and there's a lot of pushback. And it's kind of ironic in these situations, comparing it to now times, like a lot of people grew up with both my parents working, because it's like economically there's not an option to not do that unless you're making a ridiculous lot of money, or you like being poor like permanently. And although I do know of people who are kind of like this past macho man, some red pill shit or whatever, where they're like obsessed with like their wife has to just only be at home on some like barefoot in front of the oven type shit. And they don't like the idea or notion that women can also do things. So I'm sure they get really riled up on that. I'm sure there's not a lot of people that think like that, or at least I fucking hope not. But in modern times, men and women both can, do their own thing. We still have a interesting dynamic in terms of how people have to interact with each other, whether they want to or not, or societal norms with, like a heterosexual couple getting married, kind of living a certain amount of domestic life, which, in my personal opinion, I think that marriage is a thing that people probably should seek out if they're looking for just a general, normal, happy life. It's not a guaranteed thing. There's obviously a lot of other components other than being a man or a woman, in my opinion, that contribute to a long-lasting relationship, or even a happy one for that matter, normal or otherwise. All that to say is I do think there's a level of irony that exists in a man works, woman stays home kind of attitude, where there's like frustration with the financial decision making, or imprisonment in some senses, or respects rather, with who's allowed to make choices and being angry about them or whatever, or being ungrateful one way or the other. I feel like with things like equal rights, or what's the word I'm thinking of here? Oh, come on, it's coming to me. Equity. There we go. Equity. That's something that with equity, you kind of get to share the responsibility of existence, and also you get the freedom of the goods and the bads of it, right? Like paying your own bills and being able to have autonomy is pretty nice most of the time. Although a lot of people currently right now feel trapped by it with the current system. I kind of feel like that's probably going to exist no matter what, to a certain extent, of the frustration, woes, and stresses of existence. But having autonomy to decide that for yourself's a lot better than like waiting for your spouse to decide for you what you're allowed to do. Side note on that, this author wrote another story. I've not read all of it. I've just got like a general, like a fast notes or whatever of it, and I'd heard of it before. Called I think it's the Yellow Wallpaper, and it's about having essentially postpartum depression, having a bout of it, and then also having the men in your life telling you that you're not allowed to leave a room. Like the best way to recover is to rest. Really interesting notion where like even her mind. I don't know the whole story again, but like it seems like it's the author's like a semi autobiographical experience of knowing better, feeling better about like knowing your body or whatever, and then somebody else like, well, my husband says I'm supposed to stay in this room, and then the insanity that goes with that, with like not stimulating your mental faculties that do exist, regardless of misogyny saying you don't have a brain because no brain because women, like like it's a weird thing. That one, Ruffled Feathers, I read a little bit on that. I did look into the author. I've been trying to do that with most of these stories. That Ruffled Feathers, she wrote that story, and I think one of the newspaper people said at the time, like, your story is dreadfully horrible. Like, it makes me feel awful or whatever. It's just like, why would you write this? Like, I don't think the readers need this. And it's like, 'cause it's real, dude. That's why. That's like, sometimes that's the worst, or the best horror, the worst story to read, but the best horror is one where it's something that relates to you or something you see in real life or regularly, or that makes you think about like what decisions you're making. I think the story does a really good job of that on both sides. Like for the male perspective, it's like, hey, they have to do all this bullshit, and I'm upset about something small. And then at the same time, they're all just shitting on us, in spite of literally they're the ones that are saying, no, you're not supposed to do other stuff, or they're setting the standard. I kind of feel like that's a big issue with no equity, or subjugating people in different classes and oppression, or like patriarchy shit like this one is, or like the author probably talked about a lot in her life, is it does not fit the needs of either side most of the time. For the male side of it or whatever, I mean, it seems like it's kind of ego driven. I think just the base level understanding of patriarchy usually fits for an ego, or a what do you want to call that, like playing to the illusion of strength or power, when in reality, like, I guess if you're like, it's particularly in this case, if you're working class, you have to work to pay for all that shit. You have to work so much harder if in your household the income methods or whatever are lower. I wanted to contrast that with how I grew up, thinking about it from like a farm perspective. I didn't grow up on a farm. We did have animals, but a similar kind of concept. I'm a farm kind of person, where everyone that can do something should do it, and you kind of just divide the labor out like that. And then there'll be some people that don't like doing certain things, and then they don't have to do it or whatever. And it's not necessarily, I learned how to take care of chickens and stuff like from my grandma. So like, it wasn't like I needed the man for the job to learn how to do that shit. Like anybody knows in there, when you're in an environment where shit needs to get done, it doesn't matter what the fuck your genitals or ideologies are, or whatever. We just need it done. Like, like we can just make that work, right? So it's a fun thing to think about. I think that a lot of times it gets taken for granted or forgotten how extreme this like patriarchal divide was with like the housewife kind of culture. I know a lot of my people in my age range kind of have talked to their grandparents or maybe their own parents about like some level of like horror story that is like a result of the like little divide of the demanding women's role in society being only a housewife or only a mother or whatever. And I don't say only that like as if those are the like not a worthy role or whatever, but like for you to be told that's what's defining you is kind of shitty, as opposed to if you want to do that like that should be like welcomed or whatever, in my opinion. We get to see that a lot nowadays in modern times with the growth and obsession with shit like the trad wife trend, or the conservative trad wife or whatever kind of thing, where you'll see like TikToks of like women who just like make bread all day and raise kids. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that or whatever. It's just like a weird dynamic. I think it's a millennial thing mostly, where we're obsessed with like flexing our life or talking about how shitty everyone else has it. Because there's the other side of it. What do they call them? Uh, Dual income, no kids. What does that say? DINK? Dinks. That's what it is. Which is kind of funny because that made a tie to me in my brain when I first heard that, like that term actually used. I was thinking of Dinkelberg from Fairly Odd Parents, and that makes sense. Dual income, no kids, because they had all this fancy stuff. Like I don't know if anybody's ever watched that show, but Dinkelberg, they would qualify as dinks. They don't have kids. Meanwhile, Timmy's, I don't even know what Timmy's parents' name, their last name is. That is so weird. Oh, Turner. Never mind, I'm dumb. I did know. But like, they have Timmy, and then there's multiple times throughout various episodes and seasons where his dad's like, we could have this, but we have you, Timmy. Meanwhile, the Dinkelbergs have, like, some super grill or, like, a new car or whatever. But anyway, there's, like, a big culture of obsessing over this Dinks thing. Like, we have no kids, so we can do what we want. We can party all day and go to Tahiti and drink margaritas all night. Like it's, on either side, like it's a big, in my opinion, like a big deal. You're just living your life, bro. Like it's not that you can just enjoy yourself. You don't have to enjoy yourself only exclusively if you know someone else is suffering. I think that's kind of like fucking shitty to actively pursue that, but you know, to each their own, I guess. But that's also kind of probably a result of more, you know, freedom for women, and I don't think there's anything good or bad about that. I feel like the real issue we run into is just people finding places to find value in their life on their own, and then also with other people to be a part of their society or group, right? That's what we should strive for, at least. You know, finding meaning. Thanks, Windows. Finding meaning and purpose in and of ourselves and from our environment, but not burying the lead in terms of identity for people just based off of gender. I think that's kind of shitty. Oh, side note. One last little side note before we go, because I feel like it'd be weird not to mention this because this is like completely hilarious. So, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the author, she would have been, or she was a feminist. I think she was a socialist, and then she was you know, all around humanist, kind of advocating for human rights. She does have, as with a lot of people in that time period, that would be considered progressive in their time, and progressive even by our modern time, political kind of like spectrum thing. She was an advocate for eugenics. Now, I'm not going to go in great detail. I think that's just funner to just like read the Wikipedia articles or like Smithsonian articles about that people like the trouble with. And it's kind of funny because I feel like throughout history, there's been this issue, maybe not necessarily only exclusively with feminism, but like people that go for like rights. You'll have like people going for like, you know, black rights or whatever. And they'll have like one little nugget of thing that like mars the whole fucking cause in most current times progressive people's like opinion. Or even like if you're like a normal modern person, you'll be like, well, that's kind of crazy. This person's all about, you know, like, you know, equality between the sexes, but not those black people though. We can't. That's going too far. Like, listen here, women are people, but those women, no, like then it kind of goes like that. It's always funny to see that. It's fucked up though. Let's be clear on that. It's funny to see because you're just like, you're so close. You almost figured it out. You almost broke the code about, you know, just treating people good just because they're people. You don't have to have any other factors for that. But then they like have their line. I will say she has like the weird, even, I don't know how to describe this, the weird like your friend's kind of racist but not purposely racist uncle kind of energy with the like black people. I don't think she was like pro segregation and stuff or whatever, but she had like a half nuanced take, at least according to a fucking Wikipedia page. So for all I know, that could be completely wrong, but the other article made it seem like the link for the source seemed like it was legitimate, but I don't know. I wasn't there. Where she was saying that because of slavery, the plight and the situation kind of like exacerbated any problems that white Americans had with black Americans at the time. But she was like, that's therefore you shouldn't really blame them for their situation. But then she did go on some like phrenology type beat with like, well, you can just look at them. They're not made to be in civilized society. Like something to that effect. Really cursed. That's another side note is that kind of ties in to a lot of like old white feminism in the United States. Kind of goes that route, some level of exclusion. But I gotta give the benefit of the doubt. I think that's pretty. Like I'm gonna give a pass here. Like that's pretty good for the time period we're in. I mean, we're like not even at Jim Crow. Like even when this shit's published, like or in full swing. So like there's a lot of, or I mean, not out of it rather. We're on some fucking spicy shit still going strong there. So to like at least be halfway there where you're like, you can't just hate them. Like that's progress. That's, progress is usually extremely slow. It's not a high speed railway. Side note, streetcars are pretty cool. I forgot about those existing. Apparently we had like a few cities left in North America that have streetcars. They used to be a fairly common occurrence. And then they would have ones that were drawn by horses. They're like just weird. It's like a shittier bus, in my opinion. It like takes the worst part of a bus and the worst part of a train and then like combines them and puts them in an urban setting. I wonder how many people got killed by those. Because like when cars first started like being on the roads, before all the traffic laws and all like the DOT and all that stuff, people were getting hit by cars like regularly. Like kids and shit just ran over pedestrians, no right of way, just run you over with the Model T. I'm sure like droves of people had to have been just slaughtered by these goddamn streetcars because they're like they don't seem like sturdy safe. They seem like the equivalent of like canoes on land, where you're like, you can semi-control a canoe, but once that thing's going, it's kind of hard to just stop it, especially if you've been going at it for a while and you're tired. But that's pretty much all my thoughts on the story and like some of the things that made me feel. Hope you have a good one. Peace.